Another huge case today. Our newsroom just received the latest batch of evidence released in the George Zimmerman case. Hundreds of documents were made public, including a first look at what the FBI turned up in their civil rights investigation. Some of the evidence also covers interviews with Sanford police officers conducted by the Office of the Special Prosecutor. As I said, there are hundreds of pages, and we will make them available for the Scene on 5 section of our website, WPTV.com. But while we don't expect any bombshells from today's release, we do have more information. I want to welcome in our legal analyst for News Channel 5, Michelle Suskauer. Thank you for making time for us today,
Sure,
Michelle.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about this. You said you heard some of the findings. No bombshells, but there were some audio recordings. Very interesting here.
This is what's really interesting. There were some audio recordings of George Zimmerman calling the police over and over again. I believe there were at least 6 of them. Now, again, remember, he's the neighborhood watch individual for his neighborhood. So this is something that this is part of his volunteer job. And that's what he would do. When he would see somebody that he deemed would be suspicious, he would go ahead and call the police, give a description. Almost every single time, it was a description of a young black male, which I thought was interesting. But the question is this admissible in this case? Is this evidence that could potentially come in? And there's going to be arguments. Certainly, what the state wants to show is that this is someone who potentially was biased against African Americans in his neighborhood, someone who would really literally jump the gun, not listen to law enforcement, and take the law into his own hands.
And I think that's important to note. You know, as an attorney yourself, you know, all of this that's being released doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to make its way into the trial.
That's exactly right. And really what the defense is going to argue here is that this is not admissible, that these cases have to be taken individually, one by one, and that you have to look at what happened that night between George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin.
But obviously what prosecutors are going to try to, at least based on what they're releasing, is that there is a pattern here. You know, according to Trayvon Martin's attorneys, the family attorneys, they're saying, you know, Trayvon Martin was targeted because of this. And clearly with that, what we're just hearing about these audio recordings is that there could have been a pattern if that's what the prosecution plans to lay out.
But again, the defense is going to argue that that may be bad character evidence, that may be inadmissible evidence, that just because he may have acted in a particular way, that doesn't mean that he had a propensity to do something, that he was tending to do something that particular night. So it may not be something that will ever see the light of day potentially in a courtroom if in fact this case ever goes to trial.
Right, and that's my last question, is that there is still the stand your ground defense that this could be thrown out altogether.
Absolutely, and remember, in Florida, we have a defense not only criminally but civilly as well. So this is absolutely going to be brought up by his attorney that he was standing his ground, that he has immunity from this charge because of what he thought of that night and the position that he was in. So we're going to be watching this very closely. But now, next step is discovery, depositions on both sides potentially.
And that could take months.
Absolutely, it will.
Okay. At Criminal Defense is your Twitter handle?
That's right, at Criminal with a capital D Fence, and I'm going to be tweeting about this as I go through the documents more in depth.
Always on top of it. Michelle Suskauer, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also